everybody. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. My name is Sharan Setty, your host. Today we are joined by Shri M.S. Chaitra ji. He is the director of Arohi Research Foundation and is currently working as a senior fellow in the India Studies Unit for Center for Educational and Social Studies in Bengaluru. Chaitra ji, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine. Namaste.
Right. Today we'll be talking about a lot of topics around the theme of Brahminical patriarchy and the Western scholarly interpretation of Hindutva, especially given the fact that dismantling global Hindutva concluded recently. There is a lot of debate in the academic community as to how Hindutva is being politicized and is being misinterpreted by some of these Western scholars. Chaitra, let me ask you my first question. Everybody seems to be talking about the Hinduism versus Hindutva debate. What on this?
See, there is a peculiar situation. These debates began probably more than a century ago. People started talking about it. See, the peculiarity is of this kind. See, there are groups and organizations which says that they are founded on Hindutva. And there are the groups which actually challenge or criticize or sometimes wanted to dismantle this entire something called whatever that is called Hindutva. And some people would see that this Hindutva is dependent on Hinduism. And some people don't see any relationship between Hinduism and Hindutva. They make this distinction. So if you look at this marketplace, you have all kinds of stories available around Hindutva and Hinduism. Now, if you go and talk to people who say that we are for Hindutva, we are doing Hindutva politics, this is not just Sangha Parivar, there are a large number of people. They may not be even connected organization. A lot of people respond to something called Hindutva. Now, if you look at what makes them into Hindutva, the only broader term or only broader understanding that you have is that these people are referring to something which is part of Indian culture. In fact, if you talk to a large number of people, they would say even people of Pakistan, people of Burma, I mean, all these people also are very similar to us, therefore it is Hindutva. Yeah. In fact, many people would even say that how could there be Hindutva without having Muslims? So therefore, one thing is very clear. The people who think that they're part of this Hindutva kind of a world, they do not see it as part of some kind of a religion or something. There is something called Hinduism, which is a religion, and as a part of it, the essence of that religion is Hindutva, and this Hindutva gets linked to different kinds of things. Now, there are one group of people who are alleged as Hindutva group. These group of people, if they talk about, they do things in the sense they wanted to go together with a lot of people. They wanted to celebrate diversity. They wanted to respect the kind of ritual practices across the tradition, etc. Is one way in which you see them. There is also an academic and also public criticism of this movement, which would be like saying that these are fascist, these are communal, and these are that, this whatever worst thing on this earth that you could see is being alleged in Hindutva. Therefore, it is unclear now what is being debated in this. If you, on a very plain terms, if you look at it, now on a very broader term, the only way that you can make sense of Hindutva as something in this world, which is real, is that this is about people of Indian culture. I mean, if you say it, then it makes sense because then there are no religious distinctions that are necessary. There are many people who actually ascribe Hindutva is dependent on something called Hinduism. Now, it is not those people. I mean, many people call themselves Hindu and, therefore they're part of Hindutva, etc. If you look at this kind of naive descriptions which are available in the marketplace. No, it is not their headache because they don't seem to have any conception of Hinduism. And what is this relationship between Hinduism and Hindutva? Nobody knows, and it is actually the people who are alleging that, there is this Hinduism as a religion and then of which Hindutva has emerged are the one they have to prove. The only thing at the maximum that if you want to understand is that there are people who are in India. There are all kinds of people, all kinds of traditions which are there. There is extraordinary diversity of practices that they possess, and they have a wonderful way of coexisting with each other. And that is what many people would label it as Hindutva. So, but the point is, if someone asks you what is Hindutva and what is Hinduism, academic literature doesn't tell you anything. Nobody knows. Now, for at least now 800, 900 years, we know that this usage of Hindu has something to do with people of India. I mean, if you look at even in census period, there are records in census record in 1920s and 30s where even Muslims, when they were asked what group you are, which religion you are, so some people have actually recognized themselves as Hindu Mohammedans. So in that sense, Hindu is a very generic kind of a usage. And the people who belong to that kind of existence could be broadly labeled as people of Hindutva. But the academic literature, what you read in newspaper, seem to suggest something that this is fascist, communal, etc., which I don't know where to find in this world. So therefore, what are they talking about? This Hindutva as villain, Hindutva has to be dismantled, it has to be abolished. Something they're actually trying to go, and that's something which I don't think exists anymore. So this is what I can broadly say about this debate.
Very brilliantly put, sir. On the subject of propaganda, the almost comical dismantling global Hindutva event took place very recently. Who are these people? Who are the organizers? And what are they trying to achieve?
No, I think this question, the question that you have raised is a very common way in which this question gets raised in certain circles. And I do not want to take that question the way that you have framed it. I want to go a little bit to the background of it.
Sure.
Now, at any given point in time, in last 200 years, probably 300 years, see, there is initially you have the kind of picturization of India, an image of India, which emerged in the European understanding of how they have experienced, how they thought about it. Now, they spoke about it, which was very uncomfortable to people who are part of India. It didn't match with the way they lived. And now it eventually, India, and then it got translated at a later part into something which is anything which is Hindu. So the criticism of India, which became really part of this. And the third, later now, from 1970 onwards, now for this list, mega list, you have addition of organizations, not necessarily RSS and Parivar, but a whole range of organizations which are interested in both India and Hindu, the people of India, Indian culture. They are clubbed into one group, and there are groups which actually go on target and speak in a particular way, which considered very offensive, derogatory for people in India. It doesn't sort of tell anything. It is not about knowledge about us. It looks like there is a hatred, and therefore there's a story that this asymmetric relationship of what we do and how we get narrated by the European descriptions has been a cause of concern for at least 2 centuries now, where people have been reacting to this kind of picturization. Now, in this, one of the important things that they say is that there is a conspiracy to defame Hinduism, etc. And there is an element of truth in it, which I am not going to deny. But the larger question is not about conspiracy or agenda. Now, one must really recognize that there is a particular way in which the people of India and the practices of India have been framed over a period of time. And it has a 3-century history. There is a heavy pile of material which has been thought, reflected. And this was the experience of Europe. Because when they came in Europe, they didn't come as social scientists to study India. They came here, as traders. They came here as part of the colonial bureaucracy. They came here as travelers, different levels of administrators who came. They were also scholars like German Indologists, and there are a lot of Sanskritists and a lot of other people came. They were interested in India. They wanted to really learn and know about India. And they understood India in their experiential background. Europe has a particular way. For instance, when they came to India, Europe, it was a familiar experience, Europe, to have their religion. They came and they searched for religion for 2 centuries in India. With great difficulty, they made one Hindu religion, and then there was a difficulty. They have to create one Buddhist religion. Buddhist religion, and then they have to create a Jain religion, all kind of stories. So more or less the picture of India was built in the backdrop of the image that they had, their experience of the world. So in the same way, for example, all the religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, for instance, have their scriptures, holy books. So they came, and if you read the colonial archives, you would realize that there is an extraordinary attempt to go and find the scriptures of Hindus, scriptures of Jaina, which was not there. So we also use this word scripture, but we don't understand what does that mean. So in religion, these things are essential component they were searching.
Right.
In that way, they built an image. In that image, so this image has been very deep rooted, and it survives for 300 years. Now, there is a structure of thinking that is evolved over a period of time. No matter whether one university supports something or not, this has gone into development of what we call social sciences today. The sociology, political science, anthropology, all the disciplines that we have today, they emerged in the Christian culture. When they were built in India, they took the feedback of the previously established material. So therefore you have Aryan invasion theories there, you have particular way of comparative linguistics, what kind of society it is. All these stories basically were fundamentally derived out of European experience of India. They were not scientific truths of this world. Therefore, the social sciences are hardly sciences. But now what happens today is that as it grows, now the Indian people, after they started getting educated, there is a Indian freedom movement. That time there are a lot of people responding back to the discomforts of these kind of images. And the second enemy began, which started challenging this. Earlier it was India, which was a false religion for Christians. It is the idolatry of the people. These are corrupt people. Now, this image continued and became part of the, that's why you have, Indians are corrupt, and then Asiatic mode of production, the stagnant Indian society, nothing happens here. Now, all kinds of images which are part of the understanding of the Western culture, Christian culture, because this is a false religion. So therefore, there is also hatred towards this false religion. And they really genuinely wanted to bring them to true God. And they were trying to find out. And that became really a charge, eventually by 20th century, a criticism against the Hinduism. Because they really created this Hinduism. Right. There was an attempt to figure out, and there is a charge. Because Hinduism, though religion, but it is false. So therefore, there is a problem. Now, because this is deviation from what true God wanted them to follow. So this is the seduction from the devil. So they have been deviated. These people wanted to really search for true God, and some of this priestly class, Brahmins, etc., and came and deviated all these masses, and really shifted them from the path of the true God. Now, these themes that I'm telling you, if you read 19th century colonial writing, even the discussion on Aryan invasion theory, comparative linguistics, were fundamentally, they started with these biblical theological ideas which were there, and it became secular. It took a secular form by the beginning of the 20th century, and now anything which opposes this structure, is considered enemy, because anyway it is expression of the false religion. But at least in case of missionaries, it was very clear that they were explicitly targeting the false religious people, and they wanted to convert. Here there are no missionaries. Now there is a structure. Earlier it was Westerners who was actually doing it. Now Indians have taken up the position of this missionary, and a large amount of social science actually is rehashing of some of these fundamental ideas of Christianity. Therefore, this criticism of Hindutva, and it has to be dismantled, it has to be eradicated, comes from this idea. Hindutva emerges from Hinduism, and Hinduism is a religion, which is a false, but it is a attitude which has been transmitted in secular way.
Right.
Therefore, the Hindutvas are defenders of this, all false practices, idolatry of the human being. So therefore, it has to be dismantled. This is some kind of a background. Therefore, instead of looking at conspiracy, this is how the social scientific disciplines actually functions.
Right.
Now, it is just that the dismantling Hindutva took a prominent shape because it was part of a Western university. You walk in, Sharan, in India, in any university, Every day there will be a conference on human rights, there will be a conference on something or the other. Nobody comes and actually discuss what is human rights, how it is affecting the life of human beings. If you actually take the discussion, whether you agree or disagree, one could really contribute to the growth of knowledge. But you go to these conferences, the only thing that you understand is to dismantle and demolish everything that has been done. If you want to really know, you should look at the reporting that was done during the COVID-19 period, how India was portrayed. What are the issues that were taken? Right. And did they really compare it globally? If you look at it, all this hatred that you have gets reflected in terms of how Corona was reported both in India and specifically outside India, how they spoke about it.
Absolutely. In connection to what you said about colonial literature and the anti-India bias that came with the colonial experience, ask you this: how do we understand the proliferation of anti-India literature, especially in Western academia and media institutions? If I have to be specific, in the United States and Europe.
See, one of the key problem is, instead of calling it anti-India literature, okay, instead there is a particular way in which they talk about it. See, look, the difficulty of calling it anti-India. See, if they come and say this is wrong with India, we think it is anti-India literature. But there are also very interesting things you don't see, how it actually denigrates our very existence. For example, a lot of us Indians today take this pride in saying that India is a cradle of civilization. Right? We think it's a very great pride. When German romantics and German Orientalists, when they came and then when they looked at India and India is a cradle of civilization, you know what did they really say? They simply said, this is the place the different civilization grew for whatever reasons that they were doing at that point in time. But we have all advanced and India is still in the infancy. That means Indian people have not got out of the cradle and we have all gotten advanced. I mean, this is precisely what they meant. I mean, they were not praising Indians. Right. They were saying that you guys are childish. But we think it becomes celebrating. One, we don't have this understanding clearly. That's why phrasing it anti-India, pro-India is not a very useful thing to make you understand. Second, there is a particular way in which you take position about the very existence of certain human beings. So a whole range of traditions exist in India. Now, I'm not talking about geographical entity in India, but a cultural entity where people are spread all over the place. They have all kinds of practices. There is a particular way in which we engage with this world. We deal with human beings. We build relationship with nature. We build relationship with other social groups in the world. And as a consequence, we have had the most advanced, sophisticated way of coexisting with all kinds of differences. We are not just tolerant, not respecting. We are indifferent to this, different kind of differences. In fact, if someone comes and say that you respect some other, it is a non-existing question, because like me, I am existing, my neighbor also exists. So there is no question of respecting, disrespecting, no question of tolerating, not tolerating. This is part of very existing existence. Therefore, we are indifferent to differences. So this is a completely unique way of dealing with this world. But what has happened is that there is a peculiar situation that has come for us in 20th century, in the sense that cultures like India, even though we produce a lot of literature, both in vernacular languages and in the Sanskrit language, we neither tried describing ourselves at any point in time, or we never were interested in going and describing other people, right? But contrary, if you look at the Western engagement with the societies in the world, it is something very peculiar about the Western culture, in the sense that they not alone gave description of what they are, but they also went and described all over the place and gave a picture of other cultures. Given this situation, that there is a description of another culture given by one particular culture. Now, these description, all that goes as foundation of what human beings do, what is the nature of human being, what is the idea of man, whether man is rational or not, all kinds of these questions comes from one particular cultural experience, which is Western cultural experience. Now, these ideas, when many individuals, brilliant and not so brilliant individuals came, and they looked at us and they narrated our experience of this world. They narrated their experience of the world. So basically what we had, the picture of us, the Indian picture was European experience.
Yes.
And very interestingly, this picture had nothing to do with India as such. Neither false nor true, but this is precisely the experience of them. Now, if you look from that point of view, now one thing that you would realize that with the establishment of universities in India by the 1920s, early 1920s onwards, now from there onwards, all these disciplines which has gone into building policy, building ideas about Indian villages, Indian families, to any number of things that you have, all of them are fundamentally based on the foundation of what Europeans have experienced about India, what they describe. So it is rehashing, some little bit of correction here and there of that, but the fundamental story of what Indians are is from that. Now, what we have not done is that we have always felt that Western culture is superior, therefore it is treating us inferior. We have always blamed them that their political agenda, they have succumbed us. There are many number of things, and many of them might be true. And there are individuals who might have tried, divide and rule. There are individuals who might have been very abusive of Indian culture, etc., but not the whole culture as such. Not every Westerner was like that. If you see from that point of view, now what did Indians have not done? What Indians have not done, or the Europeans have not done, is that how do we produce knowledge about these human beings? This question has not come. So whatever we have today, sociology, political science, anthropology, in all these disciplines, is the European experience of Europe and European experience of India. Right? Now we don't have, how would it look like if an Indian sees India? No, it is a very hypothetical question today. We don't have an answer to such a question. And we don't know how to look at others as well. Therefore, we don't have theories and hypotheses which could actually give us an understanding of what it means to talk about human beings, irrespective of whether European, American, or whatever. In order to do that, one of the important tasks that Indians must take is that we need to really look at when Europeans, there are European stories, and many Indians have rehashed that story in last 70 years in various universities, etc. If we take those stories, they actually tell you more about the person who described us. That means it will give you more information about European culture. And one of the tasks that we must engage is by studying this description that Europeans have offered. We should actually build description, partial description of European culture. It tells more about them, it tells nothing about us. So all that, even though they might have come and met our people, spoken to our people, they would have looked at technology in India, etc. But the stories that they're talking about, the narration that they're building us, the images they're constructing, tells more about European culture. I think one of the very important tasks is to start giving a description of European culture by looking at what they wrote about us, number one, and then contrasting that with how different are we. Now, this process has not been done. It's only very recently that there are very few people, probably with great difficulty, we will hit double digits, who are thinking on these lines. We have taken step towards this journey. Now, because that has not happened, till you start talking about why Western culture acts in this way, you will not be able to understand why Andre Tuske or the Christopher Jaffarlats of this world, who are part of this dismantling Hindutva campaign, why do they do what do they do? If you simply see it as a political agenda, you simply see it as a conspiracy, maybe there is some element of truth, but it's not enough. That's not going to solve our problem, because the story, the structures that are there of talking about India are much bigger than any possible conspiracy story. They're much deeper. Therefore, it requires completely an academic engagement for next, probably 40, 50 years or so. A massive investment that Indians must do towards this.
It's an extremely interesting point that you bring up, because in connection to what you said, I have another question for you, Chaitra. As per the claims of Western scholars, Brahmins are so-called upper caste elites who oppress different communities. But this seems like some sort of a cruel joke, because in reality, Brahmins actually face a lot of economic hardships and always have been in even in history as well. Can you share the true story of Brahmins and what they have gone through and why they have been continuously subjected to falsehoods, much like Jews in Europe?
Now, I have to introduce you, sketch a larger research findings that we have over a period of 20 years under Professor Balgangadhara, and there are a whole range of people, both in India and Europe, have been sort of engaged in looking at a large number of issues, starting from untouchability, stories of caste system, to the problems of Brahminism, a whole range of issues we have looked into. In our story, in our hypothesis, now the picture emerges like this. Now, if we connect this to the previous thread that I was talking about, in the sense that whatever today we understand as description of Indian society as European experience, and it has nothing to do with the realities of this world, neither false nor true, but it exists in the heads of Europeans because that is how they experience, if you look at it. Yeah. Now, one other question, how do you explain the caste system story, where Brahminical oppression story has been the predominant story that runs even in the common sense, which has been talked about in Clubhouse to Facebook to everywhere. Now, how do you account for what in the Western culture would explain? Now, if you go back to the story, quite long. Now, when they came to India, there was this question, what is the social structure of Indian society? Right. Now, they didn't have the clear-cut answer, but what Europeans had. Mind you, there are earlier Catholics who came. They looked at Indian society slightly differently, and later the Protestants. Now, when the Protestants who started seriously writing, when they came to India, now, one of the very important things was Protestants had great problems with the priestly class, which is Catholics in Europe. So there was a tussle that was running between the Protestants and the Catholics. And they found these priests, in fact, Catholics are labeled by Protestants as Christian pagans. So in the sense, they're not really true Christians. They have corrupted Christianity by introducing a lot of false practices. Okay. Now, one of the things that Protestant first found was that there is some kind of a religion in India. This is a bit of pagan. So they already had an experience of what is considered a pagan, because yes, Catholics for them was the Christian pagans, because the Catholics built Christianity in the milieu of the pagans of the Roman Empire. So therefore, they read all these Roman texts, etc. So the criticism was already fierily charged. So first thing they discovered, there must have been priestly class in India, because this is a corrupt religion, and these are pagans, heathens and pagans and gentos. This is how we were described in 1500s, 1600s, etc. Right. Now, by then already Christianity had problems with Jews, and in Jews, now when they described the Jewish world, so there was this nation of Jews. There were tribes within them. There were different 12 tribes within them. And in this nation of the Jews, there was one group, which is the priestly group, which is called Levites. And they lived in a particular pious way, whatever way. And these were the priests. So there is a Jewish nation for which there is a priestly tribe. So for heathen nation, there is a priestly tribe which appears to be Brahmins. Now, by the time already they landed and started understanding India, they knew that there is already the heathen land, of which there has to be a heathen religion, like the Jewish religion, and there has to be a priestly class for the religion, like the Levites. And the problems with the priestly class was already there were charges which are leveled on the priestly class. One, there was a Christian account. If you want to understand, look at anything anti-Semitism, growth of anti-Semitism. So there was an extraordinary attack on the Jewish priests by the Christians in general, and Protestants had terrible problem with the Christian priestly class. So the moment they came to India, though they couldn't find anything which is called priestly, they couldn't find, but they first found, okay, everywhere Brahmins are the Archakas, Pujaris, Purohitas, they were available. Therefore, Brahmins must have been a priestly class. okay, of the heathen nation. Okay, of this heathen nation, this is the priestly class. Then the moment you fix one group into priestly class, in fact, if you look at what is so common between the Kashmiri Brahmin and the Karnataka Brahmin, that itself is a very complicated problem to describe. Okay, are Brahmins vegetarian? If you ask this question, you can't answer yes, affirmative. Okay, you have all kinds of Brahmin traditions which are available.
Yes.
But they somehow, over a period of time, it was convincing to them that these Brahmins are the priestly class. The moment you make them into priestly class, all that, for instance, Brahmins are cunning. So this was an allegation that you had on Levites, the Jewish priestly class. So all the property on Brahmins that you today charge in your charge sheet are the charges in 16th century, 17th century. Number one, the Christian charges against the Jewish priestly class, and the Protestant charges against the Catholic priests. So the moment once you make the for heathen nation, that is India, for which Brahmins are the priestly class, once you settle it, then the criticism of the priestly class is already there. You don't need to go and find. What you need to do is you take that criticism, take one isolated incident, and basically link it. Then that is the story is over. So therefore, this entire criticism of priestly class, Brahmin as the priestly class, Purohit Shahi, emerged within this experience of the Europeans. So all that you hear about, for instance, now there are two parts to it, how it further goes. So then comes the question, once they settled it, that's why if you ask who are the first people who are identified as tribes in India, you would be surprised to know Brahmins were the people who were called tribes. Okay. You look at the literature in 1500 and 1600. In the Ghentu groups, the Brahmini tribes, this is how the description. And today nobody would believe that Brahmins are tribes. Anyway, the idea, what is the idea of tribe? That would give you an idea how things have changed over a period of time. What we are making is nothing, it's very loose. And then comes the question is, then how is the social structure? So you have settled a religion, you have settled a priestly class. Now the social structure. So if you look at the archival research, for example, the early writers who were coming and writing the transaction, if you look at their book, there are instances where they were, for instance, entire mainland India except for the northern India. So there was this description of all the jati into Edangai and Balangai, left hand and right hand. All jatis apparently had this left hand and right hand, it seems. Now, so there are some writers who had this choice whether we should describe India by Edangai and Balangai, or in their Sanskrit text they talk about Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Chaturvarna, which is theoretical. We don't know whether it is here or not, but there is a theoretical discussion about it, whether you should use Edangai and Balangai to classify society or to use the Chaturvarna. Now, the choice was, at some point in time, it is arbitrarily decided that Chaturvarna had to be. And why was the Chaturvarna a chosen choice? Because if you look at European societies of that day, on that day, European society had 4 classes. So if you look at the description of the medieval Europe, they had 4 classes. There are nobles, there are serfs, all kinds of people there. So there were estates there. Now, Chaturvarna actually it is part of their experience. Look, here also there are 4 classes. Now that's how the very idea of the classes evolved, and the story of the caste system gets settled at some point in time, that the Chaturvarna of the texts which were written gives the hierarchical structure of caste system story. Now in this way the story gets built over a period of time. Now the reason why I told you this lengthy story, that at this entire process it took 200 to 300 years. By the end of 19th century, this was taking, middle of 19th century, it was taking a clear shape. By then, this is how they understood and experienced Indian society. This is the description of Indian society they had. And it is nothing to do with what was happening in India. Indians had no role to play. It is nothing to do with it. So therefore, the allegation and charges that they actually level on Brahmins is part of the criticism and the hatred of the Protestants and the Christians in general to the priestly class. And it has nothing to do with the Brahmin. Now, if you ask in reality, are Brahmins a priest? I don't know what it means to talk about priests, but even assume that pujaris and archakas are priests. Yeah. Then in India, every jati has different temple and every jati has their own purohita, there are archakas. If you look at the standard story, as though Brahmins are the only people who go and do puja. I mean, that isn't the case. So there are a large number of people who have nothing to do with it. In my district, for example, Hassan district, if I travel, if you look at the total number of the temples that are available, more than 60% of the temple does not have Brahmin archakas at all. It has been the case. Now, there is this kind of a story which has been built independent of facts. That's why this point is to be remembered, very important. Our description of Indian society has nothing to do with Indian society. It is the European experience of India. So nobody had gone and investigated, okay, what it means to talk about priests in India. Who are they? What does it mean? What are the characteristic features of the priest? We don't know. Okay, now assume that these priests are some kind of archakas and purohitas. Let's take that. Now go and survey them. There are how many number of archakas and pujaris are there, of which how many of them are Brahmins, how many of them are not. If you take this, then you would know it is hilarious to talk about Brahmins as priests. Right. And you can't even talk about Brahmin as one unit throughout the India. There is so much of variation in them. There are non-vegetarian Brahmin, vegetarian Brahmin, all kinds of kind of variation is there. Therefore, this entire obnoxious criticism that exists in Brahmins has nothing to do with Brahmins. On the contrary, if you look at it, at any given point in time, Brahmins were not rich. In fact, many people would want to argue that in the courts of the kings, it was only Brahmins. But such people who bullshit in the media, clubhouses, etc., none of them have gone and seen. For instance, take Mysore Maharaja, take Keladi Maharaja, take any Vijayanagar Maharaja. How many Brahmins were there? How many people were there in the courts and how many what predominantly? Somebody recently was saying that in Asia, how many rich people are there, of which some 40% are Brahmins, or 50%, whatever number. I don't remember the number. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there might be 10 Brahmin people who are rich. Doesn't mean that Brahmins are in a higher, extremely sophisticated condition. In fact, very pathetic condition. In fact, if you look at our Puranic narratives and anything, the story starts in Kannada, I can tell you, Bada Brahmana, the poor Brahmin. Yes. Once upon a time, there was a place, there was a poor Brahmin. This is how the story goes on. So therefore, this entire description of Brahminism and criticism of Brahmins has nothing to do at any given point of time about Brahmins. Because this is European understanding. What is hilarious about it is that it gets rehashed by Indians, but when Indians speak about it, they look like jokers precisely because it is not Indians' experience. At least when Europeans are talking about whether it is real or unreal or whatever, it is part of their experience. That is how they experience the place. But when Indians to talk about it, we don't have experience. In fact, when you speak about it, you have counter evidences to it. Probably, I think in the subsequent question, we can come back to this theme, but I will stop at it. I hope it's sort of clarified what is the problem that is available.
That's extremely brilliantly put, very valuable insights. I mean, you've covered starting from the 1500s and how it is linked. And it is actually true because it is a rather lazy attempt to sort of demonize one community and try to get a metric of how Indian society works. And those colonial lens has been passed on to Indian scholars and Western scholars even today. You're absolutely right about that. Now, in connection to what you just said, what is the nature of recent debates on Brahmins or Brahminism, as they call it, and what does it tell us about the community in India?
See, one thing is very clear today. The pathetic state of affairs of the European experience and Indian struggle to sort of own up the story. See, one of the difficulties, I can't own up others' experience. Now, if it is not my cultural experience, I cannot own up. I can intellectually make sense of, if possible. Yes. Otherwise, I can't own it. Now, Europeans built a story. That's the reason from the beginning I've been hesitant to say that it is a conspiracy or none of them, because this is how they experienced India, because they had a prior experience. Now, if you look at the contemporary debate on Brahminism, I will take few examples. Recently, for instance, in Karnataka, there was this film actor who was an educated graduate from US who came here. And he actually, his name is Chaitra, and you leveled a charge on many people that Brahminism, and that spurred a debate. It became a very large debate. And one of the important things that they were saying, that no, Brahminism is not about Brahmins. Okay, that sounds interesting. And this is not a new idea. There are a large number of people who actually keep saying it. Now, very interestingly, the people who say Brahminism has to be somehow corrected, eradicated, etc., are the people I have seen consistently becoming victim. For instance, to give you an example, Professor U.R. Anantmurthy was a champion. He was fighting against the Brahminism. And in probably 2006, 7, 8, his son-in-law used to run this journal called Deshakala. And one special issue that they brought in, a large number of intellectuals whom they really groomed, leveled a charge against Professor Anantmurthy saying this is Brahminical. He was completely clueless on how to respond to it, and they shut down this Deshakala magazine later. I don't know why did they shut it down, but there was a coincidence that this charge that was leveled on them. So recently, for instance, one of our greatest secular champion, Arundhati Roy, was leveled with this charge that she is Brahminical. And Arundhati Roy had to really come on a very, tensioned back foot. And then she had to clarify that she is not Brahminical, she has no connection. In order to say, it is very interesting, you should read her response. Now, in order to say that she is not Brahminical, so one of the route that she was trying to say, that it is, her parents were not Brahmins. That's the argument route that she was trying to say.
Right.
Now, if Brahminism has nothing to do with the Brahmins, then why should you go and take this route of difference? Now, worst, recently, in Clubhouse, there was a discussion that I went and I was a listener. And in this discussion, so in Karnataka, for instance, there is Brahmanya in Lingayata and Vakaliga. So there was an entire discussion. Lingayataralli, Vakaligaralli, Brahmanya. So apparently they were trying to find out Brahmanya in Lingayats and Vakaligas. Right? Now there are any number of things which are worst on this earth becomes Brahmanya. So finally, if you look at all this debate put together, all these people started with a high pitch saying that Brahminism has nothing to do with Brahmin as a jati. It's a kind of mindset. Now there is a new proposal in multiple languages in India that is happening, that they wanted to build organization of the writers excluding Brahmins.
Right.
That's the way to fight forward for, to take the fight against Brahminism, further. Now, if Brahminism has nothing to do with the Brahmins, why should Brahmins be not part of such a thing? So therefore, it brings you back to this question. Now, what is Brahminism?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to give you an example, here, at least in India, I can understand. Whether they're connected or not, you can talking about Brahminism might at least make sense. I'm not sure in whatever way, but for an argument, let's assume that. So there was a American post-colonial, Dorothy Faguera. She has a book. In her book title, I have forgotten the book title, but half the title is Brahminization of the Theory. Theories of alterity and Brahminization of theory, something like that.
Right.
Now, what is that in the academic circles in America, in the university? She is reflecting on how certain kind of theorization process is controlled by somebody, some set of group of people. For that, what is the description? Brahminization of theory. That becomes the title of it. That's a research. So therefore, Brahminism is something which means nothing actually.
Yes.
And the only thing that you can do is that you can add anything which you don't like.
Yes.
All that is fascism, communalism, terrorism, to every damn thing that is, you can say because it has no meaning as such, the way these people use. If you want to talk about how, for instance, Indian text talked about Brahman. No, Mahabharata discusses Brahmanya. There are a large number of things. And they talk about Brahmanya in a specific way, what it means too. There is extraordinary clarity. Now, this discussion of what constitutes Brahminism has no meaning, cannot have any meaning, because it is not part of our experience, because it is European experience. And if you see from that way, what did Europeans do? See, this Brahminism was their hatred to the priestly class. And this was Protestants' hatred towards the Catholic priests and the Christian hatred towards the Levites. Now, all that were bundled together, and they were attacked as attack on Brahminism. That's why they were cunning, they were cheating. Anything which is immoral, anything unethical, anything which is horrible in this world, you put that and say this is Brahminism, it goes today. Now, in order to talk about, is this Brahminism? For instance, take the claim. Brahminism is a particular kind of a mindset. Now, if you say mindset, it should be recognizable. Today, we are psychologically, you go to any neurologist, psychiatrist, there is schizophrenia. Now, they will go, there are symptoms, there are methods of diagnosing it, there are investigating procedure. You can say, these are the properties. This property 1, 2, 3 makes it X. This makes it Y. Now, if Brahminism is particular kind of mindset, then you should be able to characterize. Now, every time, oh, I was walking on the road, that Brahmin fellow saw me. That's Brahminism. He saw me one type. That is Brahminism. So anything and everything. So now the recent argument is, now actually Taliban is not actually Taliban. This Brahminism is Taliban. So many people said it.
Yes.
So the Taliban is an organization run by Islamic terrorists. And that is not Taliban itself. This Brahminism is apparently Taliban itself. So therefore, anything in the world, fascism to Nazism to any rape, making rape, every damn thing can be put in Brahminism because there is no way of verifying. And nobody knows what the hell this Brahminism is. And the only way, only people who could have made sense is this European 19th century, 20th century Europeans. In their experience, they had hatred to the priestly class. That's why when they speak about Brahmins, they speak very, very, very consistently. Okay. Now, it is there in their experience, in European experience. And it is nothing to neither true nor false about it. That's why you can say anything goes. So, Swara Bhasker was a champion. Suddenly she did Griha Pravesha. Now, doing Griha Pravesha becomes Brahminical. Now she has been outcast.
Right.
Because she has become Brahminical. And there was this professor in Oxford or Cambridge, I guess in UK, one of these places. So she gives a call to abolish Brahminism. Government should abolish it. There is nothing wrong. You don't know what they're abolishing.
Right.
As long as, see, these things do not exist in the real world.
Yes.
They have nothing to do with the real world, but they are true insofar as the experience of the Europeans are concerned. Europeans see that. This is connected with your question earlier. Why is the dismantling Hindutva program? Why is that these people go? Now, when they speak, they see something very significant because it is the secular version of Christian theology, which is actually driving them.
Yes.
Very legitimate, right? But when Indians participate, be it whether Indian Christians, Indian Muslim, whomever, just because they're Indian Christian doesn't mean that they know they have become Christians like the Europeans. No, they're not. And neither they understand anything in the secular way of living. So therefore, they look like jokers. That's why when you look at Indians tweeting on some of these issues, Indians are writing on this, you realize, oh my God, that's what this is the response most of the sensible people do.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Does that satisfy what you wanted to know?
Yes, 100%. And I'm in agreement with you because this continued attempt to theorize and sort of demonize one community has not really worked, because essentially our identity as a civilization and as Hindus is much more complex than what is understood in the Western colonial lens. You're absolutely right about that. Now, if there is another talking point from, let's say, the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference or the Western scholars when they generally describe Brahminism, is that they try to otherize the Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi, or what they call it as DBA communities, from the other Hindus. No, this is a very old colonial tactic. And is this really effective even today?
See, there is something. See, I don't have a fuller grip over what is happening because there are too many complicated things that are happening around. Now, there is one part. Now, this is largely the story of Hinduism and the caste system and a whole range of other themes which were built in 18th, 19th century predominantly has led to this. Now, because there assumes a religion, and religion seems to have marginalized so many things, and it must have produced certain blah, blah, blah characteristics. Now, therefore, one has to, there are some groups which are marginalized, therefore one has to revolutionarily, radically, align together and fight against this evil force called Brahmanism, whatever, abolish it and take the power out of it, etc. Now see, this is complicated story in the sense. Now this entire identity movement in the name of Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, etc. If you take them, if it is not part of the European experience, by chance you take it is true and real in this world, who are Dalits? Now, nobody knows. Now, one could actually arbitrarily arrive at this idea that let's take scheduled caste and scheduled tribe as Dalits. Okay, that constitution has created something. There is a legal mechanism and let's call them. Now, then put a range of characteristic feature to say that the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe commonly suffer these many disadvantages. Now, if you say more than 70% of the jati had to be eliminated out of this list. Okay. For example, take criteria. For example, some groups are not allowed to enter the temple. Okay, some groups are not allowed to enter some main part of the village. There is no interdining with other jatis, etc. I mean, list 3-4 characters and take the scheduled list. Now, the same jati, for instance, will be southern part of the Karnataka, will not go to temple. When in northern part of the Karnataka, they are part of the temple.
Right.
Okay, you cross 2 mountains, then you have a completely different kinds of participation. If you look at it, if the story would have been the overarching story, see, look at our caste legislation. For example, every state has a different list. Okay, if caste system is one unifying force overarching in India, then you should have a uniform list for the whole country, right?
Yes.
So caste system, so for example, X jati, you go to, Karnataka, Maharashtra border, or Karnataka, Andhra border. In Karnataka side, they belong to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe list, and in Andhra, they are in OBC list. Right? Therefore, caste system operates differently in different states, as though caste system recognizes different jatis, etc. Third, what the alleged disadvantages that you list out. As I told you, if you travel 100 kilometers, you the same community will not have the so-called disadvantage that they're talking about. Therefore, one of the difficulties is that there are certain legitimate problems in our society in this world. But in order to address those legitimate concerns which are there in our society, now what we have tried doing is we have brought over this European story of the caste system. Now, if you remove them from this larger framework of the caste system and its oppression, Brahminical oppression, if you remove it, most of this problem could be locally addressed, locally dealt with. Right? And they don't have, for example, if you say caste system is something which is all India level, then you raise this question, who is implementing it? There has to be a person who created. Manu created? It's very difficult to say so. Though many people talk about Manuada, nobody knows what the hell the Manuada is.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody understands it. I don't know what of Manu said is part of the Manuada. That also is unclear. If you read Manusmriti, you wouldn't understand why these people are talking about Manu like this way.
Right.
Okay, so that's a different issue altogether. This is neither to defend nor to discard Manu. But the point is, Manuada has nothing to, doesn't seem to have anything to do with Manu, even assuming that all that they're saying is correct. Now, if it has a bearing on our social existence, who actually implemented it? Because forget about Manusmriti being constitution of some Raja or the other. In fact, today's scholarship more or less agrees that it is not even possible to call Manu as a book of law. As earlier people used to use Manu as the lawgiver, you have extraordinarily mounting evidence today to say Manu is a book of law is a very difficult claim to make.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Now, if this were to be the case, how did Manu? 95% of the people didn't know. In fact, Manu became a very important character because of the British people.
Right.
Otherwise, there are very selected traditions who are interested in studying certain part of the Dharma Shastra. They were doing it. By and large, it had nothing to do with people. I mean, a large number of Brahmins didn't know Sanskrit, for instance, to take that as a serious charge. But anyway, for whatever reason they've built it, and there is a concocted story, which is part of the European experience, which created all kind of groups. Take, for instance, who are these Bahujan? You don't know. What makes this foundation of Bahujan? Though there is claim, you can't explain it. Okay, who are these Adivasis? Now, let's say we will travel to Uttar Kannada district in Karnataka. Okay, there are people who are living in the hills. Who are those people? There are Nayakas, there are Siddhis, there are Havyaka Brahmana.
Yes.
So are Havyaka Brahmana Adivasi or not? You don't know. What makes somebody into Adivasi or not? What makes somebody into Girijana? You don't know. So you need to bring in a large number of colonial story, European experience in order to make this happen. As a consequence, now the only thing that could emerge is this anti-Brahmin hatred. Except for that, there is nothing. As a consequence, what do? You build weaker institutions.
Right.
Okay, you build institutions on hatred. I'm not talking about government institutions. How do you make your societies function? So what do? You spread venom in the society. You divide society. You actually, you use lies and falsity to actually harass a community. In fact, most of the claims that you have on Brahminism has nothing to do with Brahmin as they claim. And why is this anti-Brahmin attitude? Why should it be there? So there are much more to talk about, and a lot of things are politically incorrect, to be more precise. I don't care. I mean, even if they are politically correct, but something that we need to think about seriously. Therefore, what DBA movements can do, or the Ahinda kind of movements can do, is to break our society, which actually happily coexists. Right. We respect each other. We deal with each other. We know how to deal with differences which Western world does not know. West wants the homogeneous society. They have a problem with any other people. Even today, religious freedom is not ensured. And as a consequence, what we have done, everything which is Indian, we are trying to attack. And in fact, the very state itself, now if you look at it, is biased against Hinduism. Everything Hindu practice, you wanted to interfere. Courts, states, every damn thing they wanted to interfere. Therefore, I mean, our state, very nature, this is a colonial state. No, it's a Christian state. We have not actually transformed it.
Yes.
Which suits our land.
Absolutely. You're right, because many of these communities that you just mentioned, who are considered to be Adivasis by the constitutional framework, have become Adivasis or STs as a consequence of history and geography, and not otherwise, in the sense that many of these communities are not even from India and they sought refuge in India. So in that sense, they have chosen to be in India as a matter of choice and not as a matter of some sort of oppression by some community. No, there is another front that you have been very vocal about, which is on freeing Hindu temples from the government administration. And this movement has again arisen, especially in the last 1 or 2 years, with people like Sadhguru coming to the forefront. And there are a lot of organizations and individuals talking about this as well. Now, why is it important to free Hindu temples from the government administration? What is happening? And if we done enough, first of all, and if we have not, how can Hindus as community come forward to take this?
See, this is a large question. As you know, for more than a decade, I have been sort of, pushing this argument that we have to free temples from the state administration.
Well, I think let's just record this question once again. So we'll just edit out, and I don't think it's come out properly. So sorry. So we'll start again. Thank you so much for this, for those comments, Chaitra ji. And on another front, you've been extremely active. You've been an active advocate for freeing Hindu temples from government administration or government control. Now, why is it important for Hindu temples to be autonomous? A. B. Why is this restricted to South India as opposed to the entirety of India? It's different here, the magnitude of it at least. And have we achieved enough? If not, what can we do about this?
See, you know that for more than a decade, I've been a been involved in sort of building this case for liberating temples from the state control. Now, the very fact that the temples came into the state control has a historical bearing, and this is a European problem in the sense British started taking the control of the temples since 1820s, with the Jagannatha temple being part of it, and there are plethora of court cases that have happened later, in any number of legislation and temple, and any number of people have been fighting. The question would be, why should one want to liberate temples from the state control? First, there are any number of answers that one could give, from very simple answers to very deeper level thinking that has to be done. Now, what business state has with the religious affair? Now, though I don't see Hinduism as religion, etc., but technically in India, if we have to talk about in the legal language, it is part of the religious freedom. Now, therefore, people had to choose and decide what they wanted to do. See, if you look at any religious matter, how churches have to be run in the United States, for example, state has nothing to say with that. Now, you can't deal with it and then dictate terms, because what happens the moment the temple goes to the state control? The moment temple goes to the state control, there will be an administrative officer, a bureaucrat. He will start dictating what should be done, what should not be done. The moment it gets annexed with the state legislation, now you will have list. Now, what kind of puja you do? Now you have a laundry list of things that are Sukukumarchane to whatever you wanted to cut a chicken in the temple, everything is there. In that list, you can't do anything more, anything less. See, look, our temples are not run like that. Our temples, we modify our temples, both structurally, even in terms of what kind of puja activities that we have to do. We communities, we decide, we create new kind of events there. And temple is not just about puja place. All our Nyaya Panchayati happens inside the temple, except for these town temples. I mean, village temples, even today, most of the dispute settlement, conflict resolution, cohesion of village activities, village development activities. For all range of activities, temple becomes the center. Not alone that, our children education, the way they learn to deal with people, is tremendously improved, because children start participating in the interactions of the temple, not just in the ritual. For instance, the way they connect to multiple individual adults in the society. They start recognizing differences in gender. The way they learn on what to do when they meet an elder, what kind of language should be used. It becomes a common kind of a pathshala. The temple is extraordinarily central, and you learn traditional. For instance, you participate in bhajan, your various singing, your various kinds of activity. You participate in sports as part of the temple activity. Sport is an integral part of the temple around. And there is this drama, there is singing. It's multifarious activity. And then one IAS officer and KS officer coming there and sitting there, he will dictate in the turn. He will put about 6 o'clock you open, 10 o'clock you close. Okay, this floor, they will do all that arrangement. I decide tomorrow what to do in our temple. When to do Kalyanotsava, when to do badminton. We will decide all these kind of activities. So we don't want state to come, number one. Second, now it is very important, because state has other hundreds of things to do today.
Yes.
Okay, you have to give education, you have to give health, you have so many other obligations that you have to do it. Please let state go and build roads, build good colleges, let them bring in education reforms, let them ensure that every single individual born in this country, goes to school, for instance. Let's make this as why should they waste to keep pujaris here? Third, see, look, in the temple, you swindle all the revenue from this temple. Okay. And then how much you give back to the temple? Look at our temples. In our village, our temples, which are not part of the Mujarai department, endowment department. Everything that comes to temple goes back to temple.
Right.
And if there is shortage, we put money and we make sure the temple is flourishing properly. Flourishing not in the sense of grandness, but in terms of what has to be done in terms of maintaining the temple.
Yes.
Now, you take all that, So get extraordinary revenue and pay this Archaka 2,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees. He can't even buy flowers in that monthly salary that is being paid to them. Right? And second, you take all the temple revenue and do what? It's only now. I have been arguing, you must have seen my earlier videos and talks where I have been saying, I have even shown with the RTI data how much money from the Hindu Temple Endowment Board has been diverted to other religious development.
Right.
Now that sort of pinches a lot of people. Why don't you, when your temples are really suffering here, the temples within the endowment board themselves are in need of money. They need Jeeronodhar of the temple. They need a lot of cleaning activity. They need the proper toilets to be built. They need dustbin to be arranged. All these things involve some kind of investment that has to be done by the government. Because it is government, we can't do anything there. It is government which has to, I can't take a dustbin and keep inside the temple. They will object. Right? And they will not bring it. How do we maintain? So it basically creates all the conditions in which a temple can flourish.
Right.
So therefore, it has to come. But one of the important points is there is a history of taking over this temple. There are all kinds of ownership that were involved in the temple. That's why one of my suggestions earlier was, 10 years back was, that the temples which had revenue less than 20 lakhs, now I would say revenue less than 50 lakhs, give back all those temples to the community. Where then you have to do it in phase-wise manner. You can't immediately in one legislation you cannot do. And there are temples like Chamundi temple, Nanjangud temple, etc. There you have to think about who would take care of this temple. How would you create an administration, management, etc. There has to be some accountability mechanism that has to be built within the public. That might take another decade time to sort of slowly shift from the state control to the temple. Those temples are very few. But the large majority of the temple, there is a Huchamma temple, Alasmardamma temple, there is this Mallikarjuna temple. Why do you want to keep that? Yes. Give it back to the people, no? Let them do whatever they want to do. Let them suffer, whatever want to do, but they have privilege. They can decide what they wanted to do in the temple. How to, because now you have just stopped them. In fact, one of the most important learning center, one of the most important socially crucial center, you have been debarred, even though it was my temple. I have nothing to say today. I have to go and stand in front of the IAS or KS officer. Sir, can you please help me? But who is he? Why should he come and dictate me? It's our temple. This is our tradition. We should have absolute freedom in what we wanted to do with it. Of course, we are not going to sell the temple. Nobody is going to do that. Yes. We are going to maintain the temple. It's very important for us to have the temple in our control because it is these communities. It is not one group of people. It is not Vishwa Hindu Parishad or something which is going to decide. It is these villagers, small temples. These are the people who are going to do it, and it has to come back.
Right.
Now, it is the colonial attitude. It is the colonial people who control our temples. And we are also controlling it. Basically, it's a Christian state. That is how it appears.
Right. And what do you see as a solution going forward? Because on part of advocacy, there is a limit to what you can do or organizations can do in their own capacity. Has there been any progress in terms of how different state governments have reacted? Or is there any specific way that we can plan out how temples can be autonomous going forward?
See, there are multiple kinds of battles that has to be fought in order to liberate temples from the state. One is to raise certain questions on religious freedom in the constitutional bench of the Supreme Court. We should create certain cases in which constitutional bench is forced to take certain position on this freedom that Indian government and the courts have in order to interfere by one clause in the constitution, Article 26, I guess, the FIR 26, one of those. Yes. So they start interfering in our temple. Now one has to create how faulty these judgments are in terms of legal language. There has to be a legal battle that has to be done. Now, we are not even close to that kind of a battle. We are not even intellectually prepared to, launch that battle. But much more than that, see, there are any number of people who have been advocating for liberation of temple from the state control and ownership. But there is no concrete plan exactly if it has to be done. What should be the modus operandi? Now, I'm sure if we talk to many governments, irrespective of the political party, if we offer them a very practical way of dealing with the problem, they would not be sort of opposing such a move.
Yeah.
But in a way that we have been very emotionally disturbed. We are frustrated that, we can't do anything within our own temple. It's something that upsets most of us. Most of the villagers like me are very furious about it. Because for every small thing in the temple, which is so insignificant, you have to go to Tehsildar to get a permission. Is quite an absurd kind of a phenomenon. In fact, if something has to be done, Tehsildar has to come and ask me. Not I have to go to the Tehsildar. But it is completely reversed today. So therefore, I think one of the important things is all these people who are pro-liberation of the temple from the endowment board must unite together. Because there is an issue why. They should come together, sit together. And most of these advocates have not taken into cognizance of what is the legislation. Because there are different kinds of laws which govern different kinds of temples. There is no one single law that regulates these temples. Now, what are the provisions? How do we deal with these kind of questions? What are the rationale? One need to examine that and then come up with a proposal for different states, for instance. See, if you are in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana somewhere, if you are, for example, there are temples like Tirupati temple, for instance. Now, you cannot immediately go and ask, Tirupati temple has to be left from the, state government. If it has to go, what is the step? What is the process? Who will manage? Now, this has to be developed. There are a lot of homework that needs to be done. And there are many things. For example, there are something that we can immediately do. Any temple which has less than 50 lakh annual transaction can be immediately. I mean, we need to function as a lobby group, which you have not done. To look at your question from 2012, where I was seriously involved in this process. In 2021, how do I see the progress? I see nothing.
Yes.
So there is no change. But it has to happen. It is very crucial for our cultural existence.
Absolutely. But, in terms of the awareness, people are much more aware. And it's not just people who are experienced with matters on this. But even the younger generation is growingly aware about what is happening and why it is important to free our religious institutions from government control. And I hope that we do see someday where there is a unifying factor and people can come together, and hopefully this will happen sooner than
I hope so.
So you have spoken about subjects that people really are very hesitant to speak about because these are very, very sensitive. And you have given us answers and enlightened us with such clarity, civility, and confidence. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us for this conversation. For me, it's been personally a very, very enlightening session, and I'm sure our audience will find the same. And I hope that this message goes across to thousands of our viewers across the global community. Thank you so much, Chaitra ji, for joining us, and I hope you can join us time and again for more such conversations.
Thank you, Sharan. Excellent.
Thank you, ji. Namaste. Have a nice.
Namaste.
And to all our viewers watching this, please do like, share, and subscribe to Citti Media and the Festival of Bharat. We will be bringing more such long-form conversations in the near future. Until then, stay tuned.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.